In this video, I want to show you how to do some thumbnail sketches for planning for your composition for the Zentangle inspired design. So the first idea I had for one of these vertical rectangles was to make a drawing of a cat. So I Googled cat sitting or sitting cat, and I found this one. And as I am sketching this drawing, you can see that I started with a center axis that goes between the cat's legs and then up through the cat's head. Now I'm putting the paws in there, the front legs. You can see that the paw on the right side is a little bit higher than the one on the left side. That's because it's further back. Then I'm looking at where the back paws are in relationship to the front paws, and I'm looking at the negative space between them. And I'm looking at where that the rear hip of the cat goes in relationship to the side of the cat. Now in order to draw the tail, again, I'm looking at the negative space. Now you'll see that as I'm drawing, I'm using a light, loose sketching technique called a gesture drawing. And that gesture drawing I did with an HB or a number 2 pencil. Now I grabbed a darker pencil. I think this one might be a 3B. And I'm working on getting on the features of the cat. But again, it's a thumbnail sketch and you don't want to get too detailed with thumbnail sketches. Note that I just did a line for the eyes. Now the center axis of the face that goes through the nose and the eye line, those will always be on a 90-degree angle for animals. And that's really important as you're laying out your drawing, that you get that 90-degree angle if you're doing an animal head from the front view. So now I'm just darkening up my lines a little bit with that 3B pencil and working on finishing up that sketch. Now for this cat, I was thinking I would just leave the background a plain white, like so many of the artists' work that we saw on the PowerPoint presentation. So that's why I didn't include a background at all. And then when I work on my cat drawing, if that's the one that I choose for my Zentangle inspired design, I would add designs on the cat's body that kind of mirror the stripes in the fur, or also that they mirror the curves in the legs or the curves in the bodies. So I'm pretty much finished with that cat. And then I'm going to jump over to a square composition. So the cat was a vertical 3x4 inch rectangle. Now this is a 4-inch square, and I showed you how to lay out all these nice little boxes for your thumbnail sketches on the directions page. So this is the letter C. It's an Old English letter C. I love Old English lettering. And of course, C is my first name, Carla. And I was thinking about the Book of Kells. That's from Ireland. And I had that as example in the PowerPoint. So, you know, you might use just a really large, beautifully designed font for your main subject of your drawing. And I thought that this C would really fit into that square composition really well. Now, as I'm laying out the C, you saw my hand really rotate quite quickly when I was doing the curve. And look how I draw the straight lines. I go pretty fast. Now, all of these videos are in real time. Okay, so I didn't speed these up for the thumbnail sketches. Now I'm working on getting that curve. Do you see how quickly I do the curves? I'm drawing light and loose, and I'm kind of swinging my arm around by my elbow so I get a really good curve. Then I decide what I should do for the straight line is to grab a ruler, because I did want to get that straight line evenly spaced from each side of the square. So that's what I did. And it turned out that that center line actually wasn't the center, it was at the 2-inch mark. And it looked like I was aiming in the right place anyway, but good idea. If you know you want to center something, particularly if you're working on a design that's symmetrical, you absolutely should put a center axis on your, into your square, you know, or your rectangle that you're drawing your thumbnail sketch in. All right, so now I'm finishing up that C, but for me, I was thinking that it wouldn't really be quite enough shapes in the composition, and I felt like it needed some more curves. I really loved that crescent moon shape of one of the C's, and I thought I would mirror that shape and create sort of these wavy-like shapes that curl around a little bit at the end. So I added them, and you know, and I would think about when I would do patterns for them, maybe I would do the patterns on the curves in the background. Maybe I would draw those a little lighter, maybe make the patterns on the C darker. You got to plan out where to put your lights and where to put your darks, and you want it to look balanced. And now you'll see I just did another curve because I thought like a sort of a semicircle would look good on the right side. And I could even make that curve on the right side almost look like a sphere, you know, or maybe a moon kind of shape. That might be really cool. So in the round shapes on the right, I'm going to show you later how to create a little bit of dimension with your patterns or tangles that you will add later. So I thought that looked pretty good for the C, and now I'm just using a 3B pencil to darken up some of the lines because I wanted the C to really stand out a little bit more. Now, I didn't do this, but if you wanted to, you could shade some of your designs if you want to figure out what parts you want really dark, you know, maybe what parts you want to look more gray, or parts that you want to stay white. Of course, you'll be covering all of your, all the figure, the central figure in your composition. You'll be covering it with patterns. But with those patterns, you've got to really keep in mind if those patterns are going to be light or dark. Okay, so for my third thumbnail sketch, now you all need to do 6. For my demonstration, I just did 3. And again, I didn't speed these up. You can see the source image that I'm working from. And I do want everyone to use some kind of photos for a source image. Please feel free to use photos from the internet. However, please do not use other artists' work for your design. So when you do searches for whatever kind of animals or insects or fonts or fish or whatever you want for your main subject, make sure you're looking at photographs and not other artists' artwork. Now, it's fine to look at other artists' artwork to get inspired and to get ideas, but I want you to really do your own original work. However, you can look at someone else's photo. So as I'm laying out the little hummingbird here, I really looked at the negative spaces between the head and the wing. I look at the angles, you know, and I try to get the direction of the angle. And now I'm just darkening up those edges. I really look at the curves, you know, the curve underneath the beak, which curves into the little belly. Here we go, curving into the belly there. And when I'm darkening up this line, you know, I'm kind of fixing the drawing and changing things a little slightly. So then I just lightly put in the direction of the feathers, and I would do that. I think that would be really fun to do with the Zentangled patterns. So as you're doing your thumbnail sketches, you're going to become aware of which sketches you enjoy working on the most. And the sketches you enjoy working on the most, those should be the one, that should be the one that you do for your final, okay? So then I thought what would look really cool with the Hummingbird is to do some clouds in a Chinese style. Now, I have long admired this stylized cloud that many Chinese artists use in their beautiful embroideries and sometimes in their paintings, but usually in their embroideries, I think, and also in their ceramic pieces. So I Googled Chinese clouds, and so I found these images, and these are fine to use because they are, they're a reference from art history, and they don't belong to a specific artist. Now I'm adding some more curves into the background. I wanted it to look like that hummingbird was flying. I was also thinking a little bit about rainbows, but so I wanted to add some curves kind of on top of the clouds to show more movement. Plus, I really was liking those curves and the semicircles that I placed in the C design. Now, all of these shapes, when we're talking in Zentangle terminology, they're called strings, okay? So Zentangle artists, they specifically call these contour line drawings that divide the background up into shapes. They call them strings, and within those strings, that's where you're going to put your patterns. Now, as you're drawing, you can also add more strings or more patterns or more shapes to put patterns inside of. So the process is open and it evolves as you're working on your drawing. The next thing I wanted to show you is how to put a grid on one of your thumbnail sketches. So the thumbnail sketch that I was just going to show you how to grid is the letter C. And here you can see that I started already. I put marks at every inch across the top. I put marks at every inch across the bottom. Now I'm connecting those two marks. And remember, and here I'm marking 1 inch, 2 inches, 3 inches. See how I line up my lines right with the numbers. So 1, 2, 3. Whenever you want to draw, a grid or borders, you've got to make sure you're drawing them at 90 degrees to each other, and you want to make sure that those lines you're drawing are parallel to the edges of the paper. So you're always going to put 2 marks and then draw your line between those 2 marks. All right, this part of the video I sped up 4 times as fast as I actually drew. So you have so many good examples that I gave you on the directions page for all the different patterns, which we call tangles in Zentangle language. But what I wanted to show you was how to create more of a 3-dimensional feel using lines, and the patterns I'm using are much looser. But you'll see some of the Zentangle artists do this type of shading on their work, especially I've seen it on like feathers on birds. And so there I did a whole series of lines, and I vary the thickness of the lines that I'm drawing. In your kit, if you bought it from Blick, you should have micron markers of several different thicknesses. Now I'm using a graphite pencil to very, very lightly do some shading, and I'm using a Q-tip to blend it. That is a blending stub. If you have one of those, you can also use it. See how that circle now looks like a round sphere? Now, I was going to show you stippling here, but not a big fan of stippling, and I don't have a marker that's quite thick enough to do it well. So what I did was I did a whole series of semicircles. You'll notice a theme with this demo here. I was like totally into semicircles today. And those semicircles on the left side, I drew them closer together and with a thicker marker. Then I made those little semicircles further apart and lighter. And you'll see now I'm shading it with a pencil. Now I'm blending it a little bit with a Q-tip. And again, I've got something that looks like a three-dimensional sphere.